Hello, I am Frederick Luis Aldama in the Department of English at the University of Texas, Austin. I'm also known among the comics community as Professor Latinx. And today I get to talk to you about why Latinx comics matter and a little bit about my journey. Now, this is going to be the kind of quick version and I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions about this or would like to chat more, please do reach out. I am on social media with the handle at Professor Latinx. Like many of us, our journeys start very early on in our lives, even before we are born, and with our parents and our parents before our parents. Mine, definitely, I can look back and see that with my activist papa from Mexico City, very much involved in the student activism and solidarity movements of the late 60s, especially in and around the Tlatelolco massacre of 68. That kind of activism really informing me in my work today, my identity, my sense of scholarship as living, breathing, working, not just in classrooms and in books, but also out in the world itself. My Guatemalan Irish American mama, who committed her life to bilingual education as a result of seeing how we were treated when we came back up across the border into California, and as children with our first language being Spanish, being told basically to not speak the dirty Mexican, and in fact punished for speaking that dirty Mexican. So all of these things, her committing her life to education, especially elementary school education, bilingual education, and my papa's own very, very deep-rooted and strong activist work very much informs me and my work today. And I did go to Berkeley, and at Berkeley, I was at a certain point asking questions about, what it meant to make Latinx culture, what these stories, how they were built, and what they could do in the world. And yeah, these were my big questions. Some of the big role models that I had: Alfred Arteaga, Barbara Christian, and then later when I went to Stanford for my PhD, Ramon Saldivar, among others, really tried to guide me and help me find answers. And this ended up leading to a career as an academic, as a scholar, working within the space of literature, Latinx literature, Latinx pop cultural studies more generally, and also the making of fiction and comics and kids' books. So yeah, a bunch of books in and around kind of, pushing at these foundational questions that I had as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. Why Latinx comics? Well, for many of us, when we moved from Mexico, so I was born there, but of course, as I just mentioned, I'm of both sides of the border. My mom is Guatemalan Irish from LA, and my dad's Chilango from Mexico City. We ended up anchoring in Northern California, and there was a little store at the corner of where we lived. They had a spin rack with these comic books. And for me, school at that time was really not a friendly place. But this little tienda at the corner of our street with the spin racks with these superhero comics was a really friendly place for me. And I started to, I would sit there and read comics for as long as I could, and buy them when I could. And really, that was my kind of literacy device. It was my safe space. And yeah, superheroes are just like amazing for me, and for many of us when we were little ones, and continue to be so today. They were that safe space. They did allow us to imagine beyond our circumstances. And you can see here in this picture me as a kind of hybrid luchador, Batman, Superman, really mixing it up and making this stuff my own. The X-Men were particularly kind of important place for me to rest my imagination and for me to find myself. Like I said, this kind of safe space. Now, remember, these were the 70s, so not a lot of superheroes of color. There was, of course, Aurora. But yeah, what was really important to me was that they were mutants, and otherwise, like, society had discarded them and thought of them as monstrous. But at the X Mansion and with Professor X, they were allowed to come into the space of exploratory learning, one that I yearned for very much, and that I was able to step inside of and feel empowered by. The other big superhero for me during this period was Ben Grimm, the Thing. And it someone like Ben Grimm, who comes from working class roots and found his alternative paths to college, was really significant for me, especially given the kind of trauma that many of us experienced being marked as monstrous by Anglophone and Anglophile elementary school teachers. So yeah, his clobbering time, I love that, of course, many of us do. Stepping into his outsized feet and skin opened a world where I clobbered schoolyard bullies, and where my skin, accent, culture, even skin color became my impenetrable armor. The mid-70s, we had White Tiger. Now, many of us were really young during that time and may not have gotten their hands on it. I got my hands on White Tiger later on, but really significant because of not necessarily being the first Latinx superhero. We had others before that, maybe most visibly with Zorro, but he was the most Afro-Latinx anchored. He was Boricua, Nuyorican, brown and proud, firmly rooted and empowered in his Afro-Latinx identity, and really, really awesome. Book smart, university educated, but also from working class roots, and also street smart, and just like really incredible. George Perez here with his geometrizing, as I call it, of this character really knocked it out of the ballpark. So for many of us, both on the East Coast, West Coast, and everyone in between, many of us Latinxes, were just, this was our kind of moment. We're still waiting for White Tiger to come up on the big screen. And in fact, the Ayala family, because Hector, the original White Tiger, his sister, and his niece have all been and continue to kind of carry that mantle of the White Tiger. There's so much going on in mainstream superhero comics in terms of Latinxes that I'm so excited about. Reptil, Humberto Lopez, the Centurions that came out a while back, Miles Morales, of course, many people know, America Chavez, Sunspot, Bobby Reyes, Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, I'm sorry, is as Ghost Rider. And yes, so just so much going on in the space of superhero comics. I love it. They do matter, and I have committed a lot of scholarly ink to this. They matter because they get us to reorientate as scholars, as people thinking about what's authorized, what's been considered worthy of study. They get us to kind of open wider our scholarly filters, questions, frames, to be inclusive and to understand that Latinx comics and representation matter, and that it's important to have this in mind when we're asking questions of the archive. And Junot Diaz just published a recent review of this book that was it was all over the place because Douglas Volk read 27,000 Marvel comics. But the real question about that was he was asking the same questions that had been asked before. So nothing really interesting was revealed about it. Had he put BIPOC comics as part of the questions that he'd been asking, he would have come up with different discoveries. And it just seems weird that in the 21st century, you have someone who's committed to reading 27,000 Marvel comics, but he's asking the same questions that, white comics fans and scholars have been asking and coming up basically with the same results instead of widening his lens to the actual archive of comics and understanding that comics is more than just white dudes, right? Building concepts and building knowledge is something that is really significant to me, not just in my books, but also in the classroom. These are some of my Jeopardy champs from my Intro to Comics course right now that I'm teaching at UT. And, bringing comics into classrooms and going on this journey with students that allows them to see that knowledge can be generated in and from, the study of comics is so important, especially bringing to a course like Introduction to Comics questions about gender, sexuality, race, and the way historically underrepresented experiences and subjectivities have and do and continue to inform the archive. And so this is really kind of comic studies in action. Here's just a little clip. We are having a lot of fun. It's not just in the comics classroom, though. It's also in documentary films and in our BIPOC comics arts festivals.
That there's still not enough need to see themselves in the media Puerto Rican, Mexican, and it's all over the place. The most exciting thing about knowing that there are superheroes for everyone. Oh, the future is it's limitless.
That's a documentary that we made to kind of bring knowledge about Latinx comics and its the willful gatekeeping, willful erasure of its actual active participation and transformation of not just comics as a storytelling medium, but also culture generally. So really kind of putting that front and center. There are other places, other ways that, beyond documentary filmmaking classroom and my book scholarship, also really importantly, making sure that other scholarship is getting published. So with the University of Texas Press, I have the World Comics and Graphic Nonfiction series, and then the actual creatives getting published. I have Latino graphics with the Ohio State University Press, and that's really a way to open the doors that have been historically, traditionally closed with all those gatekeeping actions, behaviors, going on within comic spaces that have kept our stories from being heard, from being seen, from being told. It's also important Latinx comic studies, BIPOC comic studies, not only to enrich our understanding of what's going on within the US, but also to take us back outward beyond the borders of the United States to the Americas and to the planet, to understand that comics itself is a rich kind of conversation and relay race in a way between different creatives all over the world. But of course, there are issues of like publication, distribution, and translation that often get in the way of our understanding that comics is a planetary phenomenon and very rich and vital. Our comics arts festivals and expos Texas Latino Comic Con, SoulCon that I created at OSU, and then the one that I'm creating here at the University of Texas, Austin, the BIPOC Pop Comic and Multimedia Arts Festival that will be in March. These are all really important anchors and ways for creatives, the community beyond the university, and students and faculty, scholars on the campus to come together to celebrate and also to make visible all of this incredible vitality and comic book storytelling that's happening in the BIPOC spaces across the country. That's just a little clip from SoulCon to celebrate, all of the amazing things that we do and are doing within the spaces of the BIPOC cons and expos, arts festivals. Here at UT, I built the Latinx Pop Lab in Patton Hall, and the Latinx Pop Lab is really about bringing the comics and multimedia arts together on campus and to kind of erase that town gown boundary as well by doing workshops with K through 12 in the community, bringing them to campus and having our creatives out in the campus. I have a residency program and created also this Latinx Creative Critical Consortium where Texas San Marcos, Southern Methodist University, UT Dallas, Texas A&M College Station are all involved in clearing a space for our students on campus and creatives to come together to workshop critical and creative projects with public speaking, public facing sense to their work. So bringing in folks from industry, creatives, and so on to work with our students on campus. That will be November 13th. I'm so looking forward to that. It's a full day of this on campus, one of our first events through the Pop Lab. And another initiative through the Latinx Pop Lab that I've created is the Collaborative Creative Incubator, or what I'm calling the Collaboratory. And this year we have in the Collaboratory Tim Fielder. He is the creator behind Infinitum, and Oscar Garza, who is a local comics creative. They'll be working 1 week on the theme of food, and they will create a comic book in that 1 week. And the idea is bringing a Black and a Latinx creative together to make something to put out into the world. And at the same time, they're going to be offering workshops to fifth graders in the community so that they can learn how to tell their own stories. The Power of BIPOC Pop, that's coming up in March 10th through 13th. And we will have symposium, student symposium and workshops along with expos, panels, and screenings. I am so looking forward to that. Another way to kind of bring kind of put UT front and center in this space of BIPOC comics creating and its importance. I've been creating my own comics. This is a graphic novel called Labyrinths Born. It's a sci-fi, and really imagining the future now in the hands of new generations, and these new generations using their knowledge across the arts, sciences, and humanities to make a better planet for us. I've also created with Oscar Garza several comics that are more maybe more proximate in present and topical. This one's Dora, about the experience of crossing the border and then being, as a little one, separated violently from family, and that experience done through the visual means. The Chupacabra Charlie, which is also a kid's book of mine, we decided to turn into a comic as well, a comic for a slightly older audience, a YA audience, whereas the kid's book is for little ones. And this is another a fantasy comic, but it has a very deep resonance with what's going on with our families along the border, and separation, violent separations, and caging of children. Comics can also be this wonderful way of going into our own stories and bringing them alive for others to engage with, exchange with, identify with. So yeah, I've done with John Jennings this moment in my life that could have been very different, and it's been really exciting to see how this has resonated with others who have come across this comic. What can I say? There is so much going on in Latinx comics, creations that are taking us to new places, taking us into the past, but making that past vital and alive today. It is limitless where we are able to go with Latinx comics. And so with that, all I can say is, yes, Latinx comics matter, and gracias.